Did Israel have something to do with this? Probably, if I'm being real. Saudi Arabia and
Pakistan have entered
just
into
entered
a
a defensive
mutual
pact.
defense pact. The agreement declares that aggression against one is aggression against the other.
That's a defensive
When
pact,
asked
yes.
if this places Saudi Arabia under Pakistan's nuclear umbrella, a senior Saudi official avoided specifics, saying only that the pact covers all defensive and military means deemed necessary.
I mean, that seems like it possibly. That seems like an answer that's possibly. This all coming in the news that, well, you know, obviously we're just off the heels of the U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. I'm sure, first of all, obviously the region has been in chaos, but the dynamic has been changing a lot since obviously 20 years ago. We're going to break out. We're going to break that down. And Saudi Arabia and Pakistan coming closer means a lot more for the world and for geopolitics, not just Israel, because it also means something for India, for China, for America, because Saudi Arabia, you know, we were homies with Saudi Arabia for a long time, and now it's looking a little bit more awkward.
Pakistani forces could now, in theory, deploy to Saudi Arabia with missile systems and a joint air defense network tied to satellites and interceptors.
Keep in mind, there already is there is one Muslim country that has a nuclear arsenal, and that is Pakistan. That is the only country. We were trying to eliminate another country from joining those ranks. That was Iran. With the support of Israel, bam, the U.S. comes in, airstrikes Iran. We still don't really know exactly how much damage that did. Saudi Arabia is watching this whole thing. They're watching this entire thing playing out. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country. I'm sure that they are... Well, they've been very quiet. You know, I remember hearing reports years ago that Saudi Arabia was trying to be cool with Israel. Maybe not so much anymore now that they're getting closer to Pakistan, another Muslim country, like I said in the very beginning, with nukes.
All of this would come on top of the nuclear umbrella that, by strategic ambiguity, now extends over the kingdom. The details, however, remain unclear, as the pact is not yet public.
Apparently, this has been in the makings for about 2 years now. What happened 2 years ago? I'll let you fill in the blank, but that's interesting that it started 2 years ago. Very fascinating.
What is clear is that the talks had been underway for at least 2 years, and the pact comes amid growing anxiety over America's reluctance to restrain Israel, with the Qatar attack serving as the breaking point.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty wild thing. So Saudi Arabia is definitely freaking out right now because, I mean, it's been fascinating to watch, obviously. I mean, in a horrific way, because so many horrific things have happened in the Middle East to be fair, for like hundreds of years. It's not like this is anything new. You know, the Middle East is just the crossroads of so much in the world, and it's just continuing to be the theme. But as of recently, it really feels like, wow, like Israel played the long game, and they are coming out very much on top. I mean, they're one of the only major powers left. Syria, you know, they got ousted. They just introduced another leader over there. The Iraq situation has been, you know, kind of a mess. We slowed down the Iranian nuclear facilities, but who knows exactly by how much. And here's Israel doing their thing.
Saudi Arabia was in many ways the poster child of a non-NATO ally. Its loss of trust in US security guarantees signals a deeper strategic shift, with profound implications for China, India, and Iran.
Yeah, because we have Iran completely surrounded with U.S. Military bases, if you were not aware. But yeah, we got military bases all over the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia is maybe looking for another country to guarantee its sovereignty, its independence. But yes, what does this mean for Saudi Arabia? Especially because, you know, let me remind you, Saudi Arabia was already in the BRICS expansion. Saudi Arabia was introduced when BRICS went from 5 members to, I think, 9 or 10. So is Saudi Arabia looking to possibly ally itself with more of the Chinese side of the world, the Chinese, Russia, India, Iran, Venezuela? Now, Saudi Arabia and Iran don't necessarily like each other. They follow 2 different sects of Islam. That is why Saudi Arabia obviously hops over Iran. They don't like each other. There's been a Cold War happening, a miniature Cold War happening in the Middle East for what, 10 years now, somewhere around that?
Riyadh now seeks to move on. The defense pact with Pakistan is therefore a bid for strategic autonomy.
I think before this moment, Saudi Arabia thought that they could trust the U.S. for any sort of defensive measures, but clearly the U.S. is choosing to side with Israel. All the West is choosing, but specifically the U.S. is the important member here. But so Saudi Arabia is like, I don't know if the U.S. is going to choose me, Saudi Arabia, over Israel if it comes down to it. So they're probably trying to make sure they have some bets, some fail-safes, if you will.
A once-in-a-generation realignment that marks the onset of a new geopolitical reality.
Yeah, because what do you think India feels about this whole thing? I mean, remember, India and Pakistan, they just despise each other, and that's like their number one thing. Outside of that, it's basically India, Pakistan despise. Everything else comes second to that rivalry right there. So I can't imagine that India is feeling very good about possibly having to fight basically a fuel station. Not only Pakistan, but if India moves into Pakistan, they'll be fighting the fuel station that is Saudi Arabia with a ton of money as well, which would definitely be able to support Pakistan in a possible conflict.
Alliances, after all, are not built on promises, speeches, or shared values, but on the arithmetic of hard power. Interestingly, the Defense Pact could be just one move in a much larger game.
Oh, it will. I mean, it's a domino effect. Geopolitics, one thing happens, another domino falls, and it continues to affect the entire region, the entire world. Now, also want to keep in mind, this is at the Saudi Arabian government, or monarchy, I guess I should say, is at a crossroads here. They're trying to diversify. Countries that tend to be reliant on just a singular resource, historically speaking, don't do very well into the future, So they're worried that they're completely reliant on oil. They've been trying to make a transition. All the oil states have tried to make more of a push towards tourism. The UAE, Qatar, they're trying to make, get more tourism there. They're trying to diversify their economy a little bit. Saudi Arabia is definitely a big one, and so they're really trying a lot of different moves right now.
Shortly after its signing, Trump raised the issue of Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, located just 120 kilometers from Pakistan's border.
Trump is now talking about how he wants to retake that base. So that's, again, heating up the entire region.
Given that the Saudi-Pakistani pact de facto extends a nuclear umbrella, Washington may now be exploring ways to intercept Pakistani missiles headed west. Bagram is geographically well placed for such a task. The pattern that is taking shape is difficult to ignore.
Yeah, it's important to remember, like, if any of the old heads out here, they think that the U.S. and Pakistan are cool with each other. It is really complicated, and that was just really complicated Cold War days. Pakistan and the U.S. have a very weird relationship, obviously, since we found Osama hiding in Pakistani territory, but it goes way beyond that. We were like de facto sort of allies during the Cold War, but really not really. We're barely friends anymore from humble beginnings.
Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have maintained close military ties for decades.
I wanted to say that, how the Balkans was this flashpoint during World War I that caused the entire world to go to war. I think we've been waiting for it, but it's really, if it's not obvious by now, I think the last 25 years, generally, we've all thought the Middle East is going to be the thing that causes World War III. Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Warsaw Pact, and the communist world, it really feels, obviously, like the Middle East would be the spot that would ultimately, because you got so many different things going on in the Middle East. Because you have, first of all, Pakistan's not technically in the Middle East, so maybe I should, the Middle East and slightly expanding outward in that circular area. But you got Pakistan, India, that could cause World War III. You got Israel doing things which could cause World War III. You got the U.S. constantly invading different parts of the Middle East. You got Iran trying to build a nuke. I mean, this is clearly a possible flashpoint, which I think is why everyone's so fascinated about the geopolitical situation in this region of the world.
When Islamabad carried out nuclear tests in 1998, its economy was on the brink. Foreign reserves had fallen to just $400 million against a debt of $32 billion. US sanctions pushed Pakistan toward default until Saudi money stepped in. To ease the pressure, Riyadh allowed Islamabad to buy oil on deferred payments under a 3-year plan. When the term ended, the Saudis quietly forgave much of the debt, turning the arrangement into an undeclared bailout. Generous.
You know how in a game, in a lot of strategy games, there's like a diplomatic bonus when you share the same faith? I can't help but to think that right now. Like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, they have they share the same faith, so there's like an automatic bonus modifier that gets added to the possibility of an alliance, like plus 25 points for being the same faith. That's really what this feels like.
But certainly not an easy decision. At the time, oil prices had plummeted to around $10 a barrel. So, to aid Pakistan, Saudi Arabia was left with a massive budget deficit and was forced to take loans to cover its own expenses. That bailout, in the time of need, became the bedrock of Saudi-Pakistani relations. Prince Turki bin Faisal later captured
the former Saudi intelligence chief, Prince Turki bin once described relations between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia as probably one of the closest relationships in the world between any two countries. Interesting. This is a Saudi intelligence chief. So that's Saudi Arabia's opinion right there. When was this said?
Depth of the bond, calling it one of the closest relationships in the world between any two countries.
I haven't heard of that. I mean, obviously they're close, but the closest in the world between any two countries? Like over 190 countries. You're saying that you're closer than all those other countries? You're closer than I don't know, the Vatican City and Italy? I mean, they got to be pretty close because the Vatican City is literally just a city.
Seen in this light,
they kind of need Italy to be
pact
cool.
Between the two is not a sudden, alarmist move. It simply codifies decades of cooperation. The real turning point, however, is more recent. Saudi and Pakistani officials began talks on the military pact only a few years ago.
It's kind of funny because, oh, here we go, we're getting into Israel, because Pakistan despises India, obviously. Saudi Arabia, they're worried about Israel. We're going to get into that. And then you also think, I see this stuff all the time on the internet where, like, India loves Israel for obvious reasons. I mean, India isn't the biggest fan of Islam. I mean, that comes down to the whole partition. India's Hindu, Pakistan's Islamic, and that Jerusalem is facing a very similar situation where, the Muslim world is not a big fan of Israel, and so Hindu and Judaism coming side by side, basically on the internet. Is that going to be the next defensive pact? Imagine that. Israel and India sign a defensive pact. That'd be crazy. Israel doesn't need that. Israel has literally all of the West that is supporting them. Also, I think the West would be really pissed off if they ever did anything like that. I doubt they would do that.
The war accelerated the process. For decades, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE have been close US partners, hosting numerous American bases and relying on Washington to underwrite their security.
So you got to consider, and I just brought up BRICS Plus because that's like a start, but you got to kind of worry if you're the US that all these countries that are being shown right here start to cozy up a little bit more to this anti-U.S. coalition that is forming across the world. The main one being led by China, but there's Russia. Iran makes things a little bit more complicated, but there's also India.
But in the past 2 years, they have watched uneasily as the US stood by while Israel struck targets in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, and now even Qatar.
Holy crap, let's bring that one back. That's a lot of nations that they just strike. Let's hold up. Let's listen to that again.
They have watched uneasily as the US stood by while Israel struck targets in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, and now even Qatar.
Iran and Qatar just recently with hitting those Hamas leaders.
Even though the Arab monarchies have tense, often hostile relations with Tehran, Israel's unchecked strikes have set off alarm bells.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them. First of all, Saudi Arabia does not like Iran. I mean, like I said, there has been a Cold War taking place for at least a decade in the Middle East since we, left the region, since, ISIS was taking over that whole, Iraq and Syria and things like that. But I could see that Saudi Arabia is probably like, hey, we don't like Iran, but this is getting kind of wild. These strikes and things like that.
The attack on Doha, most of all, rattled the region.
That was literally their neighbor. It was in their the Arabian Peninsula. So, yeah, don't they all have like something called the Arabian Peninsula Defensive Shield or Defensive Shield Post? Some sort of thing written like that?
Shaped how the Arab monarchies viewed their own security and America's guarantee of it. For additional context, check out...
Yeah, it's clear that America and the Western allies like France, the UK, Germany, they are very... I think we all know now that we will choose Israel over them. And that is probably making a lot of these monarchies in the Middle East, or just all of the Middle Eastern governments, really sweaty. They're sweating. That's clearly what our government has decided to do.
But our recent video on the Qatar attack, which compartmentalizes the background into clear parts for easier understanding. Suffice it to say, none of the Arab monarchies expected Israel to strike a major non-NATO ally.
They're kind of going a little wild, right? They are going wild with it, just striking. He just talked about it all over the region. I'm not surprised that Saudi Arabia is kind of, sweating bricks right now because we just went over all the countries. So Saudi Arabia is just waiting for like, when am I going to be next? Is it going to be me? Are they going to hit me?
Especially one mediating between Hamas and Israel. The Saudis now see US security guarantees differently. It doesn't carry the same weight as before. America's inertia, combined with Israel's unrestrained operations, has heightened Saudi anxieties.
Again, I said this earlier, but it's just kind of crazy that Israel is coming out on top in the giant battle royale that was the Middle East for so long. Obviously they still have a long way to go, but when you go back to 25 years ago, it was it really looked like anyone's game. It really looked like, it was a completely different landscape, first of all, 25 years ago, the Middle East region. But the last 2 years have clearly just been Israel, flexing, almost like they're doing a victory lap where it's like, yeah, we freaking won this shit. It's all us, and we're just gonna go crazy. This kind of reminds me of when the Soviets collapsed and the USA just started going ham against the world because remember we went and attacked Saddam. Also, a Middle Eastern dictator with, Operation Desert Storm. We didn't know what else to do, and we kind of did a victory lap around the world where we were just just decided, hey, the entire world's just going to say, screw this guy, screw Saddam, bam, we're going to X him out. And, that kind of is what it feels like what Israel's doing right now. You have a problem with it? Stop us. You can't. That's... Is it just me? Am I the only one that's getting that vibe?
The defense pact with Pakistan is the result of that. Technically, the pact is not a full treaty, but for Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, the distinction may not matter. More importantly, the bilateral defense pact has the potential to grow into something bigger.
Ooh, if you start expanding countries, then things are going to get a little bit funky. Now, I don't know the current situation going on in a lot of these places. However, I do know that we just introduced another kind of Western allied leader of Syria. It's a little bit complicated because we fought this force not even that long ago, but apparently now he's Western allied. Once we kicked out Assad, who made Syria Russian allied, we now have a Western-backed person in charge for this country. So at least that's the case here. But who knows who would join? Damn, if you get someone like Egypt to join, because let's look at this. Let's look at the 6-Day War in 1967. That war where Israel basically just slapped around all their neighbors. I feel like Egypt got to have a little bit of a grudge here. Imagine if a big populated country like Egypt were to join in a faction like this, a defensive pact. That'd be insane.
The Gulf Arab states have long seen Pakistan's military as a credible, nuclear-capable deterrent, and its conduct...
They're nuclear, and they have a very, very large army. Obviously, it's to counteract India, but I'm sure that could be used somewhere else. somewhere in the Middle East if they needed.
In the May 2025 skirmish with India only cemented that belief. More nations could now either join the existing defense pact or pursue separate bilateral defense pacts of their own.
Why does this look
Qatar,
like it's in
Turkey, Egypt,
bad quality?
Bangladesh, and the UAE stand out as the most likely.
Whoa. Say that again?
Egypt to separate bilateral defense pacts of their own. Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, Bangladesh, and the UAE.
Bangladesh, obviously, also another Islamic country, pretty far away from. I mean, maybe I'm sure they wouldn't mind doing it. Imagine there's like literally a NATO, like a Muslim NATO alliance. I guess we should say a Sunni alliance because the Shias are not invited, obviously. But yeah, UAE, Qatar, I could see smaller forces like that. But he did highlight Egypt.
Either join the existing defense pact or pursue separate bilateral defense pacts of their own. Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, Bangladesh.
Turkey, Egypt would be massive. Obviously, Turkey's in NATO, and Turkey's a lot more secular of a nation. But, I mean, dang, if these countries are feeling threatened, I don't know about Turkey. Who knows about Turkey? I guess anything's possible. But yeah, like I said, I think Egypt, that would be a wild one.
Bangladesh and the UAE stand out as the most likely contenders.
Imagine a big enough team like this forms. Now, that would certainly scare Israel. And that would probably force them to pump the brakes a little bit, to be honest. Because I can't imagine... Oh, man, that'd be crazy. Because if you get Turkey in an alliance like this, that means that... Well, that could be the collapse of NATO if there's a conflict that takes place. Or that could mean two NATO countries are at war with each other. And remember, if it's two NATO countries, then all of NATO doesn't necessarily get triggered. I mean, look at how many times Turkey and Greece have gotten to little skirmishes, and it's like NATO's just like, what are we supposed to do? They're both in NATO. Give some, take some.
Saudi Arabia's defense pact with Pakistan holds deep implications for both nations, but it also comes with a lot of gray area. Islamabad risks being drawn into Saudi Arabia's rivalries with Iran and Yemen, while Riyadh assumes a stake in Pakistan's disputes with India and Afghanistan. The Indian front is...
Yeah, that kind of pulls them both. This automatically makes the world... I mean, hey, this is exactly how World War I starts, right? You have too many chains of alliances, and eventually, all of a sudden, the entire world is literally at war with itself. And we were just talking about NATO. Imagine this alliance expands, NATO somehow gets involved. You know, that doesn't even... You know, we still have China and Russia, what they would decide.
Perhaps the most complex of all. Over the past decade, New Delhi has steadily strengthened its ties with...
India and Saudi Arabia share close and friendly ties with a long history of social, economic, and trade contracts. So they're talking about expanding into many strategic domains with growing investment, commitments, broadening of defense cooperation, okay?
With Riyadh. Saudi Arabia is one of India's largest oil suppliers.
Saudi Arabia is one of India's exporters of petroleum to India.
Bilateral trade sits at nearly $43 billion. And
Nice.
In April, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made his third visit to the kingdom. Yet,
So a little bit awkward. I'm sure they're not a big fan of what's going on. They are probably not happy. I wonder if India can do anything. I mean, well, I don't know if they can do anything. Can they? I guess they can make the I feel like it's a little bit too late, but can India just step in and be like, hey, Saudi Arabia, not cool, bro, not cool. Tear up the contract.
at precisely the moment when Pakistan faces the threat of Indian military action, Islamabad has secured a mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia, signed on Modi's birthday no less.
Bro, do you think they did that on purpose? I feel like that could have been just like an accident. You know what I'm saying? They probably weren't even thinking about it. Saudi Arabia probably wasn't thinking about it. Maybe Pakistan was. Saudi Arabia was just like, oh, bro, I didn't think about you. I don't know about you. I mean, it's a whole country. But I would have just not thought about it. You know, I don't think about dates like that.
So the agreement introduces new uncertainties into future India-Pakistan dynamics, which will need to be addressed as...
This does kind of pull Pakistan into a weird situation where now they're kind of surrounded by potential enemies. I mean, before it was just Pakistan and India. Now, being friendly with Saudi Arabia, it's like Pakistan's got to worry about India. And they've always had to worry about India. And now Iran on the other side of things. And then also Afghanistan's a little bit messy. I mean, China tries to counteract India by working heavily with Pakistan, but there's still disputed territory up here a little bit.
The agreement is implemented. But for Pakistan, the pact is more than a defense arrangement. It addresses its most pressing vulnerabilities. You see, Islamabad does not need Saudi guarantees. Its military, backed by nuclear deterrence, an indigenous arms industry, and Chinese weapons, can hold its own. What it lacks, however, are two essentials: energy security and financial resilience.
Which is the two things Saudi Arabia has. Yeah, that's a very good point. I actually didn't consider. I'm mostly doing this perspective from the perspective of Saudi Arabia. Obviously, I started off this video talking about Israel and all the things that Israel is doing. But yeah, I did forget, what is in this for Pakistan? I mean, they've got a huge army. They got nukes. Who cares? But they might want resources and money, and that's exactly all Saudi Arabia really has energy resources, basically in terms of oil and money.
Two essentials: energy security and financial resilience. Armed conflict is not just about tanks, missiles, and aircraft. It is about supply lines, logistics, and the liquidity needed to keep an economy running under strain. For Pakistan,
and we talked about earlier in the video how the 90s Saudi Arabia hooked them up financially.
And external shocks such as sanctions, energy.
Pakistan reliance on external assistance. Ooh, so they're hoping Saudi Arabia is that thing that provides them that external assistance.
Price spikes or sudden financial cutoffs have long capped.
This also extended to the funding from the United States, which contributed to Pakistan's debt burden and long-term economic vulnerabilities.
Its ability to sustain a prolonged war.
The alignment with the Gulf states and the U.S. drove up debt while allowing for increased economic concentration and industrial consolidation.
India had counted on this vulnerability, hoping to drain Pakistan's resources through drawn-out skirmishes. But
it felt like that. It felt like online I'd only see Indian people being like, yo, I'm not even like... I remember seeing literal takes, a lot of it, which I still see takes, and we're still going to see takes from people from India being like, yo, I don't even hate Pakistan anymore. I just feel bad for them. It just like, it really felt like India was just... I mean, maybe they still are, but... it just felt like India's just running away with it. It's not even a rivalry anymore. It's just like Pakistan's kind of been little broed in a sense, which they kind of have. I mean, Pakistan is kind of been little broed as of the last decade, I'd say.
With Saudi oil and financial backing now secured, the cap on Pakistan's endurance has been lifted. Pakistan will now be able to expand its arsenal beyond what its own economy could sustain and scale up its arms industry while doing so. To be clear, the pact is unlikely to fully deter India from striking Pakistan. But with...
I feel like India wouldn't really care. I feel like... Does this really make a difference to India? Maybe a little bit. But at the end of the day, what is Saudi Arabia going to do if India marches their entire army into Pakistan? Nothing. What? Like, I still feel like this ultimately aids the Saudis a lot more than Pakistan, but I don't know. Okay, anyways, China, Turkey, Saudi Arabia.
Support from three key powers, China, Turkey, and now Saudi Arabia, Islamabad is in a good place.
Okay, so they just wanted a bigger crew. They just wanted a bigger friend group. That is a big thing. China would be a much bigger threat for India if India just marched their big old army in there, yes.
First time, it can...
But, see, they're providing different things. So China's selling arms. Turkey that's a general there. Not sure what that is. And Saudi Arabia is providing funds. Those are all the icons that we're seeing next to these flags.
Saudi Arabia, Islamabad is in a good place. For the first time, it can pair Chinese weapons with Saudi oil and money, giving it a war-fighting capacity it has never had before. Meanwhile, for Saudi Arabia...
Yeah, because that Pakistani economy has been struggling. It's been struggling for a while, all the things I've been reading about it.
Pact is just as valuable.
Oh, for Saudi Arabia, I still think this is definitely way better for Saudi Arabia than it is for Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan, maybe they got liquidity now, but... Now, I think it was a bigger deal for Saudi Arabia. Was literally fearing for their sovereignty over here, watching Israel just bam, 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 going left and right, just hitting all these different targets surrounding them.
Saudi lawmakers had initially sought a defense treaty with the United States, along with US cooperation on a civilian nuclear program of its own. But the White House turned down the request and insisted that any deal would first require Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel.
See, that's the thing with everything that's been going on in the Middle East. Like with the Israel stuff, Israel forced the West to pick a side, specifically the U.S., because Europe was probably always going to pick Israel, I would assume. But with the U.S., they had their fingers in all these different cookie jars, like Saudi Arabia being a big one, especially when we were over there, we were like basically occupying Iraq, occupying Afghanistan. We kind of needed a lot of friends in the region. Once we pulled out, I guess America thought, well, screw it. I mean, remember, we're showing Trump here, but this started under the Biden presidency, so it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle is in charge for the U.S. They're picking Israel. It's just period. They're just picking Israel.
Tensions escalated after the Hamas attack on October 7th, which set off the Gaza war and a wider regional conflict. Riyadh grew increasingly outraged by Israel's campaign in Gaza and by the conduct of Netanyahu and his far-right allies.
I mean, it seems like we're going to be living in... I mean, the Cold War is only going to get... Well, I don't know, because you have a couple different factions that are forming. You have Israel... and I guess Syria now, that's like kind of Western-backed. You can never really tell with Turkey. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan kind of going their own way, but Saudi Arabia despises Iran, but Iran has connections with China, and Pakistan is cool with China, and...
Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman went as far as to accuse Israel of committing genocide, making it clear that normalization was off the table unless Netanyahu ends the war and takes steps toward establishing a Palestinian state.
He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. I mean, damn. It's been a minute, and he's still going wild with it. So are we surprised to see the Islamic countries make moves like this?
At the same time, the Saudis kept close ties with the Trump administration. They pledged more than...
The entire Muslim world is going to be pushed towards the China side of the growing faction, the growing divide that we're seeing here in the 21st century. But it's very different. It is not an ideological war that is gearing up. It's not like the Cold War days. And it's more, like I keep saying, it's just a coalition against the U.S. and the West. And the best thing, I mean, the problem is that for this coalition is they're gonna have to put aside a ton of their own differences. They're gonna have to despise the U.S. and the West far more than they despise each other, and that could be an issue because Saudi Arabia does not like Iran, Pakistan does not like India, but those rivalries are gonna have to be put on hold if they want to fight Israel and the U.S. and Europe.
$600 billion.
I think that's unlikely, to be honest. Today, in Saudi Arabia, President Donald J. Trump announced Saudi Arabia's $600 billion commitment to invest in the United States. Oh, I remember that, yeah.
In U.S. investments, and hosted Trump in Riyadh during his Gulf tour in May. The hope was to nudge the White House toward compromise on the defense treaty. However, the negotiations that followed came to nothing. Saudi officials...
Why does it feel like that's just been the theme so far of 2025? Every time we have negotiations, nothing. Whether it's Israel and Gaza, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's this, what negotiations has worked out? I mean, besides the sanctions, I guess we're negotiating with certain countries. The tariff prices that we're going to do against certain countries. It's the only time I've heard these meetings come to at least a conclusion.
Officials now acknowledge that a defense treaty with Washington is not going to happen unless they first normalize relations with Israel, something they have made clear they will not do. And so, for Saudi Arabia, the pact with Pakistan doubles as a signal to Washington and Tel Aviv that the kingdom can chart its own security. And frankly, it has to. Saudi Arabia sits at the intersection of global trade, energy infrastructure, and regional conflicts. These are all liabilities that cut to its very survival.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is in a tough spot. I mean, the Middle East is, in general, if you're located in the Middle East, you're going to be surrounded by enemies. That's just like the nature of things, basically. One thing I am considering, though, is that trade through that Red Sea is going to be depleting over the next several years, over the next decade or two, because the Arctic Circle is going to continue to melt up there. Climate change is going to continue to cause more shipping to actually get sent through the Arctic Circle instead of the Suez. I was literally just reviewing a post about how it's now faster to go from China to France through the north, which is only 18 days, than to go through China, the Suez to get to France. That takes 30. And it's cheaper. That's the crazy thing, is it's cheaper to go through the north and it's faster. So that is going to definitely impact all these countries that surround the Suez.
Conflicts. These are all liabilities that cut to its very survival. But by tying its defense to Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state with experience in both conventional and unconventional warfare, Riyadh gains an ally that can act without Washington's oversight. The pact is, at once, a hedge against an Israeli strike on Saudi soil and as an insurance against American unpredictability. Perhaps most—
That is literally the best way to describe America. That is what the entire world now sees the U.S., even our allies, even Europe, is like, and there's literally a famous quote from Charles de Gaulle. I can't remember what it is anymore, but he literally says, the only thing you can trust, it's something like, the only thing you can trust is you can't trust the Americans, or you can't trust what the Americans are going to do, because we're so wishy-washy. And part of that is our political system. Part of that is, I don't know, other things. I feel like a lot of it has to do with our political system, because the pendulum swings so drastically back and forth depending on who's in office, what administration is in power.
Most importantly, the pact extends Pakistan's nuclear umbrella over Saudi Arabia, even if not spelled out.
Does Pakistan care about that, though? Does Pakistan care about extending that? The nuclear umbrella, I feel like, is just to protect their own sovereignty. Does Pakistan care to have a wider umbrella over the Middle East? I mean, I guess in the case of Iran, it might be helpful, but I don't think Pakistan really cares much about being able to nuke Egypt, for instance.
In the agreement, the strategic ambiguity of Pakistani nukes factoring into Saudi's security is deterrent enough.
That's the biggest question here, is will now we see nukes stationed in Saudi Arabia? That's basically, I mean, the defense pact is big, but also the nuke question is even bigger, because obviously Saudi Arabia has definitely toyed with the idea that they should get nukes, not only because their rival who they hate, Iran, has nukes, but also their other country that they kind of used to despise, I think they now are back to despising it, Israel, also has nukes. So Saudi Arabia needed to find a way to guarantee its independence. They thought it was going to be the U.S. Pakistan is a good way to be like, okay, well, if the U.S. says screw you, we can use Pakistan and their nukes.
And so, by signing the defense pact, Saudi Arabia has de facto gained a nuclear umbrella without breaching non-proliferation norms, while Pakistan has landed the strongest bankroller in the Middle East without the fiscal strings of the IMF.
Bam.
Nevertheless,
yeah, that's the big thing that I'm seeing in the comment section is now Pakistan doesn't need the IMF.
Remain firmly in place. Saudi Arabia remains and will continue to be primarily dependent on the US for security. For now, this is hedging, not—
Yeah, but Saudi Arabia is beginning to move away. They're just making sure they have, they're hedging their bets just in case the US decides to do anything stupid, which don't be surprised if we do. I mean, that's literally should be our middle name, to be honest. We love doing stupid things.
Dependent on the US for security. For now, this is hedging, not decoupling.
Bam! Caspian Report with another banger. I mean, obviously I've talked about this before. I've been watching this channel for like 10 years. He's always been one of my favorites. We have Saudi-Pakistan military partnership before GTA 6. Man, we're getting everything before GTA 6. Saudis have money. Pakistan has a functional military. Makes sense. I mean, I guess when you put it like that, yes, this is hedging, not decoupling. Genius. Again, that video is by Caspian Report. Please go check him out. Big thanks to my patrons this month. If you want your name here, check that Patreon link in the description down below. Never change Drew unless you want to. We need a Drew bobblehead figurine. Petition for Drew Alexander to make Hoi Terrible ASMR Connor Tingles Pavlik. Version 2. Frederick Tiblin. King Bear Hayes. Lord Luxembourg Lover. Miglu the Goat. Nolan. Nord Tyrol. Tambrin. And William.